Dave, a lot of the talk, I think, has so far been what changes need to be made, and obviously something needs to change, it sounds like, from the voices we've heard so far, and a lot of the talk is focused on maybe going younger, looking at internal options. Does that, if that's the direction this team goes, does that slow down the process that you have in mind for where this team needs to be a contender in the playoffs every year? Does going that direction, it's not a rebuild, but does it slow you down?
I don't know yet, because I don't know which young players they're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, it's early in the process. I mean, you come out of that game last night. It's real early. You're gonna review everything. You don't believe me. Everything hasn't got reviewed from last night already. But you're exactly right. And when you don't make the playoffs 2 years in a row, we have to take steps forward. And whether that's going back to some younger players that make you better, give you energy, maybe that's supplementing some of the players that we have. I mean, all those things are up for discussion. Mm-hmm. And the goal is to move forward. And sometimes just because you say young players come in, that doesn't mean you take a step backwards. Maybe that is the way to go forward.
Was motivation a factor at all with this team? Energy, emotion, passion? Did you see a lack of that in this team?
I think probably the biggest emotion that you could put on the season was more frustration. And the frustration came from a lot of the inconsistency in our game. And, we'd have a game or two where you look like we're going to push ahead, and then you take steps back, and that frustration was evident in our group. Because ultimately, when you're playing, everybody wants to win. Everybody's talking and saying the right things, but it's about doing, and the frustration and not being able to get some things done. I think that was probably the emotion that was most prevalent. Now, there was times when the emotion, the excitement of getting things going the right way was good. I felt like coming out of the Olympic break, we were playing the right way. Schmitty was playing well. Go on that road trip, you got some enthusiasm there. And then, for whatever reason, we couldn't sustain it the last couple of weeks. So, if you got an emotion to describe, and it's probably a little bit tainted by today, because the frustration of today is prevalent, but it was a frustrating group.
Dave, we're only 1 year in, so perspective will probably change. But what is your takeaway from Mike Ribeiro's first season as a Coyote?
I thought he started the first couple months. I thought were positive, and for whatever reason, the last half of the season was far below what I expected.
How do
Did
you
you think what made you think he would be a fit here, and what makes you think he still could be?
Well, he brings another element that we don't have. You look at Vermette, Hansel, even we ended up Chipchura, Helper, and they're all good working centers. But this guy can make a play that can have an impact on the game. And I think there's some things, like I think he helped our power play a little bit. But when he was, that best stretch he had, I think it was November or whatever, when he had 12 points in 8 or 9 games or whatever, and there were key points, a couple goals against Detroit, some games like that. Those are the things that I expect, but I expect them for a whole season, not for part of a season. So that's something that we're going to have to dig into with him, why the decline, and some of it is as his play dropped off, his minutes dropped off, and his effectiveness dropped off. So those are all things that certainly will be looked at.
How much is his line mates too? We've seen him with kind of a certain set of wingers over the years that he does well with. You have to, he's on the books for 3 more years. Do you have to make it work maybe from that angle too?
Yeah, no, that's all. But before we get to the wingers, we got to look in the mirror first.
With Vermette, Dave, the year that he has, what worked well, and do you think that he can sustain this and keep having careers like this, years like this?
I think he's just a real solid player. Yeah, solid player. Recognizes that he recognizes how he has to play to be effective, and it's easy to look at his goals or points, but it's what he does the rest of it. Like when you get I mean, the Wards last night is a good example. He got most valuable player, but he got a hardest working player, right? Block shots. I mean, he competed hard in a lot of areas for us. I think I just met with him this morning a little bit. I think he down the stretch here. I think he got fatigued a little bit. I mean, with Hansel being out, we relied on him a ton, and so he's excited about continue to improve his game and help us win. But I think the ability to manage his minutes and manage his responsibility or help him with that will even make him a better player.
He was a little sick too, I think you said over
Yeah,
the
he's
weekend.
gone through a little bit of,
Run him down a bit.
yeah.
There's some concern about Keith Yandle's defensive abilities, what, plus 20, plus 25, is that a concern at all?
Minus 25, you mean?
Minus, not plus, not minus 25, minus 20.
It's a concern, yeah, it's it's a concern, but the one thing with Jans, there's always that risk-reward factor in it. With Jans, his power play this year went to another level, went to a level that is we hadn't seen before. He took a responsibility for improving our power play and a leadership role in that, and did a very good job. That being said, his defensive play is still it's inconsistent, and we saw a couple of stretches this year where it was the best it's ever been in our group. That month before the Olympic selections there, he was a real good two-way player. But the other side of that is, if you look at it, that plus minus, I think he finished minus 23. I think we gave up the second most empty net goals in the league. I think it was 13, 14. I guarantee you, if it wasn't 13, 14, it was awful close to that number he's on for empty netters. So that stat can be skewed sometimes. That being said, for him to get to the next level as an elite player, the defending that we saw for spurts this year, if he can bring that, he can get to that next level.
After what happened last offseason with Bodker and finally getting a contract done, did he come in this season and deliver what you thought he would after what went on?
Yeah,
proving he's part of this core.
He's right on track. He's a good young player that he's a player that can grow in your organization, be a real good he's not a young player anymore, he'd be a good player for a long time. Yeah, he took real positive steps. There's still steps for him to grow. There's still his board work, his 200-foot game is still, there's areas of growth there, but he's gone from being a young player, a player that wasn't sure if he could do it, to a player he knows he can do it now. And he's good skill, good committed, good teammate, all the things you like as a player.
Radim Verbata is a free agent at the end of the season. How do you evaluate a guy like that? On the one hand, it's the kind of skill you need in this lineup, but he didn't, like a lot of guys, he didn't produce down the stretch.
Well, he'll be a guy that is in the conversations. He's a producer of he's a goal scorer. He can score goals. So that skill set, you need to have a certain amount of that on your group. That being said, the skill set's you got to do it. You can't just talk about it. But he's been a good player for this organization. That goes without saying. He's been a good fit for us. He was like a lot of our other forwards down the stretch there. You'd certainly like to chip in one here or there, and he would tell you that. Like, he's an honest evaluator. He's a smart player. He's a smart guy, smart player, and so he brings that skill set that if we've seen him when he gets hot, he can be a really good player. The other side of it is he's been a very good shootout player for us, which is, all those things have to come into the discussion.
Don was alluding to recapturing identity of this group. We also touched on chemistry in the mix. Did you sense there was just something off, Dave, throughout the course of this?
Yeah, I think that's part of that frustration stuff that we talked about. I think that's certainly a factor. Certainly a factor. If you're not going to be a cap team where you're going to have 3 or 4 superstars that are going to just drag everybody along, and not to say those teams like that don't have good chemistry, but for us, it's a must. You have to have the chemistry, and we've seen that in the past. It was us against the world chemistry, and we've had some success with that, and that's certainly where we need to get back to.
Was that Minnesota game the toughest game to walk away from when it was clearly a turning point? You know,
Yeah, I mean, turning point is a good way to put that, because that could have been a springboard game up, and you jump into seventh there, all of a sudden you feel like you're ahead of the pack, not in the pack, and so that certainly was a game that, in hindsight, was a real big one.